I'm a storyteller, and I use the camera to find truth. It has allowed me to look at the human condition with intimacy and remind us who we can be at our very best. So many of us are afraid to try something new, afraid to take the road less traveled. And one of the things that shooting with the Leica Q2 Monochrome has reminded me of is to not be afraid of failure and to tell your own story. And the universe has a way of listening to you when you're being truthful. At the beginning of this year, I was still wondering what my voice really was as a photographer. And the anti-racist movement globally happened, and the protest found me, really. And I felt responsible to be a custodian of those stories, to be a custodian of the extraordinary allyship and solidarity that is the very beating heart of this United Kingdom. The great gift that is the still image, that is photography, something Leica has been part of from the very beginning of this art form, is that it really is available to everyone. Anyone can pick up a camera and begin their journey in finding who they are as a creative. Having the right tools is paramount, and I found the right tools with Leica cameras. And from the moment we've begun this waltz of creativity, I've been able to paint a type of visual poetry that I never thought I would in my wildest dreams.
A lot of my images are informed by, well, I guess my childhood in some way, and the fairy tales that I used to read as a child, or the dreams that I have. I'm really an intensive dreamer. I dream a lot. I'm always using symbols and metaphors that people can subconsciously connect to, regardless of their cultural background or their personal experiences. So, of course, anyone create their own story when they look at my photographs, and that is my aim. I remember the magic moments, discovering how the image comes through on the paper, and this was the first encounter with black and white photography specifically. Without the color, you see more the graphical aspects of the picture. You see more the play between light and shadow. I'm creating narratives, I think, in everything that I do as an artist, and it begins maybe even with the music that I'm composing. So everything I do is in a way connected. I work completely alone, so I set up everything alone, I prepare everything alone. Really hands-on, like the whole body experience, the whole mind experience. So it's almost like meditation in a way. And I really, really enjoy the process of working with this camera because it becomes almost like an extension of your body. Actually, one of the aspects that I like so much about the Q2 Monochrome, it's not overly geared. There's not too much technicalities that you have to take care of all the time. So it's literally like you put a film in and you shoot. It's almost like that. Now, in this project, when I started finally photographing myself, I kind of put together all the elements, and performing is part of the process. Exploring my journey into my childhood and my past and my fantasies and my fears, but in the same time with somewhat humorous approach. You know, I dream so much that sometimes I don't know where the reality of my dream ends and where the reality of the everyday begins. I'm not sure which one was a dream, which one was real.
Welcome, Leica fans, and welcome to another episode of Leica Tech Talk, episode number 3. We're here again today to bring a very special program. I'm your host, Antonio Benedetto, product specialist for Leica Camera USA, and I'm so glad I already see people in the chat talking away, saying where they're tuning in from, whether it's sunny St. Paul, Minnesota, or Bermuda, or all over the place, in Brazil as well. Hey, an extra shout out to Benjamin, JP, and Tom for signing in very early and chatting with me a little bit. So I can tell that people are very excited for today's topic, which maybe spoiler alert, may know what it is. But I'd be remiss if I didn't introduce my partner in crime, my colleague, my co-host, Mr. John Kreidler. Hey, John.
Hey, Antonio. Great to be with you here today on episode 3. And it's all about the soul of the monochrome. So
That's right.
Why don't you kind of take us through it a little bit before we dive right in?
Yeah, so today we're talking the soul of the Leica Monochrome, and I know people have questions, so sound off in the chat for when you've got those questions. We're going to do our best to answer them, and we're going to be talking digital monochromes, digital rangefinders, and a little bit of film, maybe a little bit of extra stuff for you analog fans as well. But ultimately, you know, Leica has these cameras that are very specialized, right? These cameras that only record black and white, even though they're digital. And I think from the foremost, at the very beginning, John, people asked us, why? Why monochrome? Why do we make cameras like these? And I think there's a special quality to them, wouldn't you say? It's something about black and white that's just a little bit different than when you see color, when you record or capture a picture in color and convert to black and white. So why don't we take them through why the monochrome?
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the monochrome. I know myself, shooting a monochrome, it kind of refreshes my creative palette, where I start to see differently and think differently and look for different subjects that I wouldn't normally photograph when I'm shooting in color. So again, you're thinking differently. But why the monochrome? So I think for many of us, that's where it all started. Our love of photography, we started with shooting film and black and white film to help us learn compositionally and how to shoot. And, you know, there's something about still even today, right? Opening that box of Tri-X or T-Max.
That's right.
And you get that that scent of the film and that tactile feel of loading a roll. It's still something as a photographer you just enjoy.
Yeah, for sure. And also, John, you know, when we think of the history of Leica and the history of photography, so much of what we think and visualize is in black and white. If I say, you know, just a few words like Vietnam Napalm Girl or VJ Day Kiss, I bet many of you in our audience, you can visualize what those images are, those historic Leica pictures, and they were in black and white. Actually, hey, in the chat, sound off, you got maybe a few words that describes an iconic photo, and see if others pick up on what it is. But it's all about black and white. And as you said, John, it's kind of a back to basics. It's where people usually start, and it's a different kind of way to do and take pictures. You know, so I think ultimately when we think why the monochrome, we should then look to maybe our colleagues in Germany, which John, if we go back to our slides, I think you've got some insights that we asked one of our colleagues that has some direct access and direct hand in these monochrome cameras.
Right, right you are, Antonio. You know, our good friend Jesko, who's the product manager for the M camera and probably has the most, should I say, coveted job in all of Leica to shepherd the M through the gauntlet of features and requests. And the interesting thing when we were speaking with Jesko was that he was there from the very beginning of the concept. So it was great to get his insight. And I'm going to read his quote that we got from him. So he said, "We started to consider the monochrome concept with the Leica M8, but it really wasn't until we had the M9 where we began to witness the real noticeable advantages of producing a monochrome camera. And we're always looking to create products that advance the artistic vision of the photographer. The monochrome products are an important part of that philosophy, utilizing technical advantages to yield a truly unique experience." And you know, when we were talking to him, those words rang so true to me, where we're really trying to produce products that allow a photographer to express his vision or her vision, to tell their story in a way that the technology doesn't get in the way. It's a very natural extension of their artistic vision. And that stays true to what we've always done. We've always had products that were innovative, but were always contain the essentials. Mm-hmm. So to me, you know, his comment really rang very true. So, you know, I think it'd be really cool if in the chat people wanted to chime in. We've had, you know, several versions of the monochrome out, including film cameras. If you just want to type in the chat kind of your favorite monochrome, the camera that, or maybe the first camera, Leica camera that you used that really helped you capture your vision, that would be really something very interesting. So I guess now, Antonio, why don't we go back and we'll talk about a dear friend that we were introduced to in 2012 named Henri.
Yeah, so kind of a funny inside baseball aspect. You know, Leica cameras have usually code names, as I imagine most companies have for their products. And when the M monochrome was conceived, its code name was Henri or Henry. Shout out to Henri Cartier-Bresson, of course, the famed street photographer. And you know, the concept was unique. When it was released, people said, "What is Leica doing? Why don't they know that you can just take a camera that takes color and convert it to black and white?" And we said, no, there's a certain way of doing it that's quite special. So this is a very unique camera, and what it enabled us to do was also quite special. Higher ISO range, again, an 18 megapixel CCD black and white sensor that was based on the M9P. But this was a formula that worked, and people seemed to really love it. So as Jesko had mentioned in the quote we got from him, this concept was being baked in the M8 days, but came to fruition with the M9. And then it was successful enough that we saw the M Monochrome Type 246 based on the MP Type 240. Bump in resolution to 24 megapixels, CMOS sensor, so even better ISO performance, and then, you know, even a little more versatility because it added video in 1080p. Now, we move on from the M Type 246 to the current M monochrome model, the M10 monochrome. Now, someone in the chat already asked this question, said, Brooke asked, other than more megapixels, what is the difference between the monochrome 246 and the M10? Well, of course, you see the jump in resolution from 24 to 40 megapixels. It's also all the benefits of the M10 platform. So the thinner body, the 3-button layout that's more streamlined, the beautiful ISO dial on the top for that, you know, great control. You can see all of your settings right from the top, even when the camera's turned off. And yeah, also Leica Photos connectivity with Wi-Fi. So all the benefits of the M10 system are here. And with the M10 monochrome being based on the M10P, you get even the quiet shutter, the silent mechanical shutter, and the touch screen. So a lot to love with the M10 Monochrome. And if we're going to talk some technical things coming up a little later in the program, and you're going to see just how good this camera can do at high ISOs in particular. Now, John, then also last year in 2020, we not only got the M10 Monochrome, but we got, I think was maybe one of your faves, the Q2 Monochrome.
Yeah, definitely. So it's interesting, the Q2 Monochrome. And what I like about the experience, the shooting experience, is the Q, as as many of us know, has a very similar, say, feel like an M, but it's not a rangefinder. But there are some really significant and nice features about the Q2 and Q2 Monochrome, that being its autofocus, but still gives you the ability, if you want to manually focus, built-in macro lens, of course, increased resolution to the 47.3 megapixel. But also, to me, one thing I really enjoy is the video. So being able to shoot Cine 4K at 24 or UHD at 30 and 24, or my personal favorite, full HD at 120 in slow motion, really allows you to capture, I think, footage that is very emotional. And here, I don't know if anyone's gotten much snow this winter, but I've
maybe
had
a little
enough.
bit, John.
I don't know about you, but there's something about just shooting video, particularly with this Q2 Monochrome and its slow motion, and just how beautiful it looks. And basically, image stabilization, that was handheld. And I probably only had 4 or 5 espressos that day. So it was a good day for me in terms of steadiness. So, but all that to say, I guess, to move on would be that we did get a quote from AG with one of your good friends.
Yeah, so we have got some insights also from product management. Mr. Peter Krzyzewski, our good friend and colleague over in Wetzlar, who manages the Leica compact cameras, and that includes the Q2 and Q2 Monochrome. So we asked him, why the Q2 Monochrome? Why was the Q2 graced with the presence of monochrome status? And he said we had feedback from the market that a monochrome version of the Q2 was of great interest. We began to investigate and realized that the 28mm Summilux lens was up to the challenge of being able to render a 47 megapixel monochrome sensor. So we set to work to bring the camera to market. In many ways, the Q product line is the most like the M, and for us, it seemed like a natural progression. And I really can't agree more. So many people love their Q cameras because of maybe the way it supports an M system. If you already own an M, or you have another camera that gives that kind of rendering and feel and vibe and handling, but without having to worry about manual focusing. You get some more modern features with autofocus, continuous tracking, all those kinds of things. Some great ISO performance, overall fantastic performance. And John, as you showed a little bit with the video, with firmware 2.0 of the Q2 and the Q2 Monochrome from day one, you have manual control over video, 4K, UHD, and 1080. And John, you didn't tell me that was handheld. I actually assumed you set up a tripod for that. So way to surprise me while we're live. I didn't know.
Yeah, well, let me set up a tripod. Come on, seriously? In the snow? Yeah, not likely.
I just assumed because it was so rock solid. I'm telling you, folks, I did not know that was handheld.
Yeah,
the OIS
stabilizer is incredible in that camera.
Yeah. So ultimately, we've talked a little bit here now about what these camera models have done, what they've achieved. I'm sure people may be wondering, some people maybe already know this, but how does a monochrome become a monochrome? How do we create a monochrome? So John, can you take us through this? What are the changes to a sensor? We talked about how, the M9 monochrome was based on an M9P, the M Monochrome Type 246 was based on the MP Type 240, and M10 Monochrome with M10P. So do we just take the sensor and strip something away and just slap it in and we're done? What do we do here?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. No, not at all. So I guess the first thing just to kind of relate in hopefully a somewhat clear way, is that basically to create a color image with a sensor, the sensor itself has what's called a bare filter or a color array filter. So there is actually one color filter over each pixel well. So these are very tiny filters. So as light comes through, the sensor is actually gathering information that is then used to process the image. And that information is either about the red channel, the green channel, or the blue channel. So then through a series of mathematics and interpolation, we utilize the information of neighboring pixel wells to then interpolate the other two channels, in the case of a red, to find the green and the blue. So all that to say, that's simply, I guess, as simply as possible how it works. So when we talk about monochrome, we're really faced with a couple of challenges. Challenge one is being able to remove the filter, which through manufacturing is something we were able to accomplish. The next thing is, since we no longer have color information that we were utilizing to create the image file, we had to think of a whole nother way of creating the image, basically just utilizing shades of gray. So that's one of the nice benefits of a monochrome camera, is that we're no longer interpolating all that color information. We're getting that information on a pixel level. And what that does from a, say, a color noise standpoint as ISOs grow, is that we're now looking at noise on the pixel level and not being amplified through interpolation. So Antonio, take us through some of the other benefits of the monochrome sensor.
Right, so that's how the technical aspects of how we make a monochrome, but what makes a monochrome really, it goes beyond that, and that's the benefit that you get from using one of these versus just converting color to black and white. So everything that John just mentioned with the no need for interpolation, removal of the color filter array or just lack of the color filter array, what that yields is we have an increase in sharpness and in natural sharpness. We have increased image tonality and reduced noise. So because we're recording light at the pixel level and we're no longer magnifying noise from color interpolation, we have reduced noise that looks more grain-like. It has more of a film grain kind of look to it. And with each pixel well receiving more light because there's no color filter array, the ISO range actually climbs. So we've seen this across the board from the very beginning. The M9 Monochrome went from, I believe it was 160 to 3200 ISO all the way, or 6400 all the way to 320 to 10,000 ISO. Then we reached 25,000 ISO. Now we reach 100,000 ISO. So the ISOs keep climbing and they scale higher than their color counterparts, but it's cleaner at those high ISOs as well. And we're going to have some comparisons to show you firsthand how you can see hard evidence that shows how that's done. But the other aspect is the intangibles. And again, shout out to people in the chat. I've seen people tuning in on this and saying how it's the thought process. You think differently in black and white. You take different pictures in black and white. And that's a big component of using the monochrome camera. You can no longer go back to color. You can set any camera to black and white. But typically, especially if you're shooting RAW, that's just the JPEG settings. If you import your RAWs, they're all in color. And that really kind of changes up the workflow a bit, in addition to all the tangible technical changes that we've just gone over. It's up here as well, right? So yeah, I see a lot of people tuning in and mentioning that element of black and white photography really helping or being a big part of the experience. And it's here with the M10 Monochrome, Q2 Monochrome, all the monochrome cameras to really hone you in on black and white, looking for texture, looking for detail and light, and not being distracted by color. Now, John, I think ultimately this is something that maybe a lot of people don't get at first. And I'm gonna be honest with all of you. I was one of them. I used to say, hey, I can just go shoot Tri-X. I can load Tri-X in my M6. I've got a monochrome. I can just convert, my M9 image from color to black and white. This is what I was saying back in that time when I was shooting those cameras. And then I took this photo. I got to borrow an M9 monochrome and a 50 Noctilux 0.95. I saw somebody in the chat mention that being the 50 Noctilux on a monochrome is like the pinnacle. Took this photo of a friend of mine and former colleague, and it was just like a candlelight bar scene, really, really dim, really dark, 0.95 wide open at like max ISO or damn near close. And I was just blown away. This is what helped convince me that this monochrome formula, this concept is the real deal. This is not just a gimmick. This isn't just, just a story we tell. There are the tangible benefits that you gain, and I saw it firsthand. Now, continuing forward, there have been other situations that I've been in where using a monochrome camera became it really affected me in a significant way. This is another image that I shot, another aha moment, again with the M9 monochrome. I think I told you folks in the chat that I was going to show you some M9 monochrome images, so here are a few. This was actually at my sister's wedding, and because a rangefinder is so discreet, I was able to take this photo of my aunts and my uncle, in this really candid, fun moment that I really cherish, because I've heard people say that they draw all kinds of like stories from this. Maybe it's there's a dispute between them, or they're like little kids on park benches. But ultimately, it's what makes an M special, right? It's the way it's discreet, the way you can use it and use it with people, and then all the qualities and the sharpness and detail and the tonality of the monochrome that brings these images to life in such a cool and timeless way. And then one more that I've got that I want to tell you a little bit more of a story about. This is a shot that I took, again, M9 monochrome era. So this was when the M Type 240 had come out. I was still using M9 monochrome, and I would want to shoot bands just as a fan from the crowd. And I always wanted to use the M9 monochrome because to me, these like small, dingy punk clubs, they're like the best when you photograph them in black and white. And I used to do this with film with like Ilford Delta 3200. And the M9 monochrome showed me I could do this now digitally at ISO 10,000 and get the kind of look and rendering that I loved about film, but at a much higher ISO to make my life a lot easier. So this is a band called the Wilhelm Screen that I remember shooting 2 cameras. I had an M240 and an M9 monochrome, and I'm getting bounced around in the crowd, and it was an amazing show. And I set the M240 to black and white, but when I imported the files, I saw them all in color. And it really threw off my kind of hardline stance on all these shows that I shoot. I'm going to shoot them in black and white. And I was like, oh, maybe I do a split. Maybe I do half black and white, half color. And then I started to like think about like, no. I want the grit. I want black and white. So I set all my color images to black and white in Lightroom. Never looked at them in color again. And again, it's a mindset thing. It's how the workflow relates to your creativity when you are locked in and adhere to true black and white full-time all the time. So these are some of the intangibles that we talk about that you experience best when you use the cameras. Now, that's a lot for me, but John, you've also got some great insights and stories from some of your black and white work with these cameras.
Right. So this image was one of the first that I took with the M10 Monochrome, and what I discovered is here shooting at 32,000 ISO in Miami Beach early evening. It just what struck me is there's a sharpness to it, and here even hand holding a rangefinder at a 15th of a second, which I got to tell you, I mean, I was surprised it's as sharp as it is. But to me, sharpness is one thing from a technology standpoint. We're always talking about is resolution and sharpness. But to me, the real impact of a monochrome is how it renders the out of focus bits, or how the emotional parts of the image look and render. And to me, that's what struck me. There's sharpness, there's detail, but there's also this transition in the tonal range that, to me, just kind of adds an emotional component to the image that I wouldn't see with a color photo. Color tends to, I mean, for me to dominate, and I lose that emotional impact. So being a visual storyteller, again, the monochrome, I feel gives your images and your stories another dimension where it's keyed more into the emotional. So here with the Q2 Monochrome, shooting from Liberty State Park, to me, what I like about the Q2 Monochrome is while it can be automatic, it can be fully manual. And I had the ability with, here with the 28 millimeter lens to get all of Lower Manhattan skyline in, but yet have this really nice kind of out of focus bit of interest in the foreground point of interest. So of the binoculars, you know what it is, and yet it's out of focus. And to me, it's just, again, the camera's ability to really do that and to do that seamlessly. It is a different experience than a rangefinder, but the way it works and the way it's set up, it kind of mimics that rangefinder experience, yet being this compact camera that's a lot of fun, that's small, and like I said, compact, easy to carry and take with you everywhere. And zooming in to the skyline and seeing the resolution of the detail is amazing. So we've got more images to share, and this is now where Antonio is going to describe the tests that he set up for us to view and compare image files.
That's right. Here we go. So you can just see I'm excited for this because we thought, well, we got to show a little bit of technical presentation of how these cameras really compare. People ask all the time, can't you just convert? Isn't that fine enough? How big of a difference is there really? So we thought, well, we want to show you guys plenty of regular images, but here let's try to do like a little bit of testing. And I swear this is not just a way to some kind of weird flex that I want to show off my Lego Millennium Falcon. I promise. I'm just letting my nerd card really show here. But we tested the M10 Monochrome, the M10R, a couple of film cameras as well. So T-Max 3200, Tri-X 400, and Q2 Monochrome and Q2. Now, all the M lenses use the 28 millimeter f2 Summicron aspherical. So all of the cameras are shooting at 28 millimeter. They're all stopped down to f2.8. And we focused on ISOs 400 and 3200 for the full comparison because of the film stops, right? And the color images were just converted to black and white. No further changes done. Black and white monochrome images are straight out of the camera. And so I just want to show you the full image looks like a 28. That red box that you see there, that's what we're really going to zone in on for this comparison side by side. So if we go to our first comparison, we're looking at ISO 400 across the board. So here you see on the left we have the M10 Monochrome. You see we have the M10R beside it. Next is the M3, which is just there for its Tri-X 400, which I had loaded into it. Q2 Monochrome, and then Q2. Ultimately, of course, they all look great at 400. The Tri-X has some grain, as you would expect, even at 400. But it's film, it's beautiful, it's got a great look to it. And I included it because so many people talk about how the monochromes kind of have a bit of a Tri-X look to them straight out of camera. And I know you can always change that even with scans and post-processing, but I thought it'd be cool to include some film. So for all you analog fans, we welcome you. We never talk bad about film because we still love it. As John said earlier in the program, there's something special about it for sure. Now, what I'm seeing though, while they all look good at ISO 400, of course, all digital cameras these days look good at ISO 400. But if we look a little bit at the tonality, so if you look at those darker bricks, which are actually in real life like a burgundy red color, if you look from M10 Monochrome to M10R, and then Q2 Monochrome to Q2, do you see how there's a slight variation in the contrast and the tonality of those darker bricks and in respect to the remaining tonality of the frame? So that's one little hint on how there's a natively different rendering of the monochrome sensors. And people will ask, yeah, can you just mimic it? Can you just do post-processing and make the color one just the same as the monochrome? Well, you can get it close, but it'll never be 100% the same. And our further tests we're going to show you in a bit are going to also show you why. Now, John, you often talk about emotional rendering, and one thing that you often think about is the out of focus areas as well. So from this image to as we step into the next image when you're ready, tell us a little bit about like what to look for in the soft details, not just the sharp.
Right. Well, I think we'll start to see here at 3200 just kind of this change in tonal range and this transition between the plane of focus and as it goes to the background or to the foreground. To me, it has to do, like you were saying, really with the tonal range and how if we kind of look at it, and if we could take the grain off of the T-Max 3200, I think what we would see is that the tonal range of the monochromes and the T-Max are very similar. But if we look even closer at, say, M10 Monochrome and M10R, particularly just behind Chewy, how that there's a real difference in tonal range. And to me, the monochromes have that more similar look to film, where the color versions with the color stripped tend to be flatter and not have the same tonal range or contrast value.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, it's again, we love film. I'll just reemphasize that, and we'll continue to emphasize that. So we got another comparison coming up that we don't want it to send the wrong message. You know, film still has a great look, and T-Max 3200 especially. You know, and we had to, of course, normalize and unify all of these images for the resolution. We have some varying resolutions from 40 megapixels to 47 megapixels, and then of course the film isn't really quite that resolution. But here now we see another comparison, head-to-head M10R and M10 Monochrome. And again, this is maybe one of the things that people ask all the time, which is why I want to make this comparison. So this is ISO 25,000 for both shots. M10 Monochrome, of course, straight out of camera, M10R raw, but converted to black and white. And you see here that I would say, and we always debate, John and I always go back and forth. We say that, you know, image noise is a little bit subjective. Some people might find a little bit of noise is intolerable, and some might find a good amount of noise no big deal. It depends on what you're used to, what your output is. Are you printing? Are you showing it huge on screen? What are you looking at? Are you pixel peeping? I mean, right now, we're pixel peeping. Let's be honest. But what this is showing us is 25,000 ISO on the M10R. I'd say looks quite good. But the M10 Monochrome is that much better. Huge difference, very noticeable here. And this is getting to a point at these higher ISOs where it's also going to be really apparent at the even at the full image, not just when we're pixel peeping. So again, M10R versus M10 Monochrome. And now we can move on. We've got another one to show the Q2s side by side. So Q2 Monochrome versus Q2. Again, kind of a similar story here, right? We see just that's little bit of increased sharpness, and because the image is a good deal cleaner in black and white with the Q2 Monochrome, we really see how this starts to change our perspective. When you photograph with a lot of image noise, you can get a great image, and you can always reduce it in post, yes, and that will of course make it a little softer though, right? You lose some sharpness, but you can hide that grain and that noise. But here you see that, you know, when you look at that out of focus area, John, that emotional rendering, as you put it, the blur in the background behind Chewy there, you know, it gives it more depth. And when you look at the full image, you actually can really tell them apart because you are kind of looking through noise when you have a lot of image noise. And when you have a clean image like this at high ISO, you still maintain more of that dimension from sharp point to natural fall off, which is, yeah, just quite a lovely look, especially at these high ISOs.
Right, and I think it goes back to Peter's quote, you know, where he said that the the 28mm Summilux lens was up to the challenge of being with a monochrome sensor. I mean, you can just see how sharp that lens really is.
Yeah, for sure. And we've got another one coming up a little bit that'll show even more. But one more comparison with M's. So again, we love film. This does really start to show, though, how big of a difference we're talking when we talk these high ISOs and how much we were used to in the film days and still are when we shoot film today. T-Max 3200 has a really nice look to it. There's a great, desirable look to high ISO black and white film. But we can go so much further now with these sensors and these monochrome sensors. It's really astounding to see 50,000 ISO put next to 3200 ISO, and you see how much of a difference there is in sharpness, in resolution, and a big difference in grain. Again, there's no wrong way of doing this. It's just a matter of what you prefer and how these monochrome cameras can enable you to do more in black and white. So it's pretty exciting and pretty cool to see. And again, I salute all you film users, you analog users. I know there's some people in here, even at the very beginning of the program, some of the early people that signed in that I was chatting with were talking about how they use film. And there's still a great quality to it, for sure. But there's also something very special about what these new modern sensors can output in black and white. And I think, John, that'll take us maybe to one more comparison. John, would you say that this is maybe one of the burning questions we get from people?
Definitely. M10 Monochrome versus Q2 Monochrome. Which one should I get? Well, arguably both, right? But
of course,
in all seriousness, like I had mentioned, and Peter had mentioned in his quote, that that 28 Summilux lens that's on the Q2 camera and the Q2 Monochrome is exceptional, and it's purpose built. It's a lens and sensor and camera combination that's all designed to work together by design, where an M10 Monochrome, being a rangefinder and system camera, that sensor and that camera design and how we generate images with it has to respond to many different lenses, not just the most modern lenses, but like we talked about last time in Tech Talks, the classic lenses. So to me, to be very honest, it's remarkable that these two images are so similar. Yet you do see a slight edge, I would say, in sharpness to the Q2 Monochrome, to the M10 Monochrome. But again, a big part of a choice between one or the other is the shooting experience that you want. Do you want that true rangefinder experience where you're looking through the world unfiltered? You're not looking through a lens. You can set focus, aperture, shutter speed, and ISO all with the camera turned off. And you can, both cameras you can shoot from the hip. But to me, the M10 Monochrome has a much different shooting experience. I enjoy both, and I think it depends on your level of comfort, whether you want that true rangefinder experience or you enjoy the autofocus and quick nature of a Q2 Monochrome.
Yeah, exactly. It does come down to use case and personal preference. I've seen people saying how much they love their Qs and some how much they love their Ms, and there's really no wrong answer. It comes down to what you like and how you use it. Like we said, we've definitely gotten this question a lot, M10 Monochrome versus Q2 Monochrome. Now that there is another monochrome, right? The monochrome family is no longer just an M camera thing. It's now growing. It's grown to the Q2 system. So, I would say based on these images, I was kind of a little bit surprised that they have, some push and pull here. As you said, John, the M10 Monochrome has a slight edge in high ISO performance in terms of the cleanliness of the image. It's a little bit cleaner in the grain, but the Q2 Monochrome has a slight edge in sharpness. But again, closed system versus a system camera that can be adapted to all kinds of lenses, which we covered extensively last month in episode 2, as you said. And I saw some people talking about some classic lenses. I've seen some people asking all kinds of questions. Actually, maybe this would be a good opportunity for just a few quick questions and comments from the chat. I saw people talking about classic filters, right? Like in terms of color filters, red, yellow, orange filters, green filters. And yes, you can use all of those on the monochrome cameras. It's another benefit of them is you can use the traditional filters and affect your contrast at the camera level before you ever get it into post. It's just a different way of working. That's not to say that that's superior to doing it in post processing, but you can get a nice look straight out of the camera with, like, say, an orange filter or a yellow filter or a green filter. So that's a pretty cool aspect. And I saw a couple of people mentioning, or one person saying, they just leave a color filter on their monochrome almost all the time, and that's particularly cool if that look really speaks to you. And some other questions that popped up. Some comments about how the M10 Monochrome and the 50 Apo is such a joy to use. I agree. I joke that the perfect combo, the perfect two-lens kit is the Q2 Monochrome and the M10 Monochrome with the 50 Apo mounted on it. Perfect two-camera, two-lens kit in black and white, and then in color, the Q2 and the M10R. Effectively, though, I see it, well, we saw some variations and differences in the Q2 Monochrome versus the M10 Monochrome. We have to remind ourselves that we are looking pretty close. We're pixel peeping a bit. I think effectively you kind of do have parity for most real world circumstances. So I think that's important to think about if you're going to make a decision on one of these cameras. Again, it just goes back to what we were saying with how do you want to use it? What do you want to do with it? And what in your photography is it going to help you with? I personally love how the Q2 Monochrome, I just feel like I've got like fine art ready to go at any moment. And it's something that can fit in almost any bag I have. And then, of course, the M10 Monochrome, is ready to go with just about any lens. And there's almost so much versatility to this in black and white. So there's a lot to be said about that. Keep the questions coming. Keep the comments coming. Really appreciate it. I saw one other question. Did Chewy help me with my test shots? He was very unresponsive. Funny enough, I don't know why. I kept asking him, but he just kept growling at me and not really being very helpful. Another person asked, "Where did I get this shirt?" This shout out to our friends at Visual Apparel. I don't think this monochrome shirt is available anymore. It was a limited drop, so sorry for the bit of the thirst there, but it's not available anymore. But check out Visual Apparel for some Leica-inspired shirts as well as some other cool stuff. So, all right, John, I'm talking way too much. I'm caffeinated. We see it, we feel it, we hear it. How about we talk a little more photography, we show some more photographs, and especially if we bring it over into Lightroom, we can show some monochrome images that you and I have made that we can speak over, and then again, answer some more of the audience's questions.
Sounds great. Let's get to it.
All right, so here we are in Lightroom now. John, let's start with some of your images. I'd like you to speak about some here. And sure. Yeah, let's dive right into this quite close up.
Okay.
I see the lens, so obviously Q2 Monochrome.
Exactly correct. Yeah, so the Q2 Monochrome has a macro mode, and it's really one of those features that I really enjoy using, whether it's Q2 or Q2 Monochrome. But what constantly blows me away with the Q2 Monochrome in particular is the amount of texture and sharpness that you get from the plane of focus, but also with the 28 millimeter, how quick that fall off is when you're in that close, and just how beautiful and three-dimensional that the image renders. It's really the creamy sharpness of of Leica and the Leica look. So it's obviously plenty of detail where you want it, but then giving you this very, again, what I would consider an emotional rendering, where it allows you as a viewer looking at this image to imagine what's going on beyond the plane of focus in a way that other cameras and other lenses may not facilitate. So
yeah, and it's
just
wild.
A lot of fun to shoot.
It really is, and it's crazy to think. So I was zooming in there not only to 100%, but I also did 200% there, and you saw the level of detail. It really kind of boggles the mind when you can see this level of fall off at macro levels. it's really awesome. It's crazy. Thanks, Eric. Eric gave you a shout out. Said that's a hell of a shot, John. Really is.
Thanks. Thank you. It was very cool.
All right, John. Yeah. All right. Let's move on to some more images.
Okay.
What can you tell us about this one?
Okay, so this was in Soho. I'm seeing this tag a lot around New York. Dream until it's your reality. And to be honest, that's what grabbed me first. And shooting it, and then looking at the image in Lightroom, and being able to see the actual texture of the plywood that's used, and even zooming in, seeing the texture of the marker that was used to make the tag, just really blew me away in terms of sharpness and detail. And even looking at the brick and the stucco or the limestone, whatever it is, there around the brick, and seeing that detail, again, capturing that, to me, is quintessential monochrome imaging, where you're looking for that texture, you want to see that detail. And I was really amazed by just overall the texture in this particular image and level of detail.
It's funny. John, the Q2 Monochrome has so much sharpness and resolution that sometimes I forget if I'm at 200% or 100%. So right. I realized I was at 200% the whole time there, folks. This is 100%. It really starts to kind of boggle the mind, and you start to lose yourself in the image, which is a great kind of feeling to have when you can see so much within them. And then you jump back out and you're like, oh yeah, that's right. Oh my God, this is a 28mm lens. Yeah. And I actually still have this whole image to look at, but it's fun to see what we can dive deeper into. Yeah. And now, was this a similar shot to the one you showed us earlier?
Right.
Not so the Q2 Monochrome,
kind of
right?
In the same, no, this is the M10 Monochrome with the 75 Noctilux. So personally, the 75 Noctilux, anyone who knows me, that's one of my favorite lenses to shoot. And if you have it, why not, right? So
of course,
it's a lot of fun. And that lens in particular, I find focus point is incredibly sharp. But then you have, again, this creamy sharpness, this drop off, shooting wide open, of course, just still being able to make out, that it's lower Manhattan, but being able to see the detail and really a lot of the texture of those crazy coin-operated binoculars that always, to me, look like a face, like an alien, a friendly alien.
Yes, of course.
Which is kind of always fun. So again, just that rendering, looking at texture, looking at detail. Is that 200%?
That's 200%. Hey folks, shall we go to 300? I think it's like we could just. When does it stop? 300%. There you go, John.
What I find interesting is I was actually able to focus a rangefinder with the 75 Noctilux wide open, or I'm sorry, it looks like it was f4, but still in like 20-degree weather. A real challenge, but amazing level of detail.
Well, and this is probably, the thing is, folks, with if you've shot M digital cameras, you know that, of course, since we kept the mount the same for all these years, the aperture is an estimation from the camera. So sometimes if it says f4, it could still be like a 2.8 or something. So we have to give that a little bit of a caveat. But it's just crazy to just go around here at 300%. And you can even see this drop off, the fall off from the optics here in the surface and the metal to the quarters only in the back. I mean, that's probably just an inch in separation right there, and how much of a fall off there is. And again, this is 300%, 3-to-1, which is just crazy that we have this much resolution. And it's really uncanny. All right, John, let's show some others. Already zoomed in. Iconic New York shot, I see.
Yeah, definitely. So close, obviously close to Midtown. I might have been just a few blocks north of Flatiron here at this point. And again, M10 Monochrome with the 75 Noctilux. And I mean, to me, what I was just trying to do is to kind of play the whole with the American flag and the Empire State Building, just to kind of give a sense of, yeah, an iconic New York type shot. But I'm not sure if we zoom into the building how in focus, whether we can see some of the detail, like in the spirals.
Well, that's only
if we can see
100%.
detail.
Let's
Yeah.
dive a little deeper. Let's go modest. Let's go 200%. It looks like still a good amount of detail there, John.
Yeah.
I think you got your focus.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
it's a little bit
yeah,
maybe a little over the process, but it's still got sharpness.
Traditionally, that's my style. It was an Ansel Adams thing: underexposed and overdeveloped.
No worries.
Overprocessed? No.
But I mean, well, you've got another one that, you know, we're showing some that have like a just strong, like technical sharpness, you know, but now tell me about this one, a little bit of a different vibe here.
Right. So, like I had mentioned earlier, to me, okay, sharpness is great, but sometimes there's a story that maybe it needs to be a little bit more emotional, that where you want the viewer of the image to kind of put their own spin on it, to imagine. So you're not putting every detail right in front of them. You're allowing them to kind of do their own interpretation of the image. So this image, the gate, while it may look sharp, it's not sharp. But what interests me was this artwork that was locked behind this gate, and to me, I kind of wanted it to be maybe just slightly out of focus. It's enough to know that it is a lock gate, but and you kind of see or imagine the artwork behind it. But to me, it just has a great feel. And a lot of times when I'm shooting the monochrome, that's what I'm trying to achieve, is either when I see the image, or someone interested in my photography sees the image, I want to try to elicit a feeling about what I'm seeing. So many times I get way too wrapped up in hyper focus. So sometimes, just as an exercise, it's nice to try and create images that have more of an emotional appeal, and that's what I was attempting to do there.
Yeah, for sure. And we're getting some questions from the chat on this, John. Some asked, did you use the EVF for any of these shots that we saw with the 75 Noctilux?
No.
All rangefinder, all the time.
All rangefinder. Yeah.
Yeah,
and
that's
it's
impressive.
I mean, look, it's it's if you shoot enough with it, you'll get good enough with it. I've heard that a number of times. It does take practice, particularly if you're shooting that lens wide open. But to be very honest, if I'm shooting an M camera, I want it to be the rangefinder experience. If I wanted to do something like something more in a commercial setting where I really wanted to consistently nail everything, I would put the lens on an SL2, SL2S, and shoot it that way. But
you know what, John? I think another example, I know this is one of your shots, but I'm going to jump in here, because I really admire this shot, and I admire this kind of rendering where, these kinds of images where you can dive in and see things that you couldn't before. Out here, we see the arch of Washington Square Park. But then when you zoom in, you very apparently and obviously notice the netting all around the arch. And it's just, it's sharpness for days. And it's so cool to, you know, I love being able to photograph, you know, works of art and architecture and go with these cameras, go closer and deeper than you ever could, unless you just sat under there with a pair of binoculars, maybe. You know, it really is uncanny what you can see, you know, what more there is to the world when you can magnify it through a Leica lens. It's really quite special. Now, I saw some other comments in the chat. Some people were asking for anything with people. I know, you know, a lot of these images are taken more recently, so you know, obviously it's a little harder to sometimes take pictures of people these days. But here we go. I've got, if it's cool, I'll jump into one of my photos. So this is something that I shot with the Q2 Monochrome back when it came out, and you know, a little bit of socially distanced meal. This was my niece that I photographed at ISO 100,000. That's not a typo. That EXIF data is correct. This is 100,000 ISO. Now, to be fair, it might be coming through a little darker, possibly, you know, through the stream. But this is one of the images that really blew me away. And this is one, I know people use those terms like game changer all the time. It becomes a bit cliche, but you know, this is the kind of thing where if I didn't have a camera like the Q2 Monochrome, I wouldn't have been able to get this shot. I got this silly photo of my niece. It's of course important to me because it's family, but if we zoom into it, now that's, I believe, 100%, you know, I didn't focus on her face perfectly. That's my mistake. But ultimately, you know, what we see here is like the jacket, how there's still sharpness and detail, you know, in that jacket where it's really focused. And even if we go in, this is 200%. If you look at the zipper, look at the texture of the strap here, 1/125th of a second, 100,000 ISO, wide open at f1.7. Folks, think about how dark that is. You know, and I remember when I shot this just a week or two prior, I was in basically the same situation with my family, out, you know, eating in the driveway and you know, sharing some time while we could outdoors. And I didn't take any photos. I just skipped past it. I left the camera in the bag once it got this dark. But the Q2 Monochrome allowed me to continue shooting, to take this kind of picture and capture this. So this is the kind of things that we talk about that, you know, enable you to do special things with the monochrome cameras, because it allows you to see in the dark, as cliche as that can be sometimes. And yeah, it got me this kind of cool photo, you know, that I cherish because it's family, but it's a cool story. There's something fun to it.
Yeah, no, I really love that, and I hate it when all the cheese comes off the pizza as well. That's a drag.
Yeah. And I just saw a question. Can you go into the develop module and look at processing? Actually, that's a great point. So I appreciate that feedback. And if you guys got more feedback or questions, throw them in the chat. You can see here in the develop module, I didn't do anything to this photo. So I think I tinkered with some cropping. You see the cropping where I did a post to Instagram where I showed 100% crop. So that's what that crop rectangle history is. But ultimately, this is straight out of camera. There's no noise reduction done to this. So that's a key component of this. This is what you get out of 100,000 ISO of the Q2 Monochrome straight out of camera. All right, so we're quickly running out of time. So let's jump through a few more images, and we'll go a little faster. These two are kind of a pair, also 100,000 ISO and 50,000 ISO on the Q2 Monochrome. So this is around Halloween time. Took some pictures of these cool, fun things of these Halloween decorations casting a shadow. And you know, here we see how much detail and texture we can get even at 100,000 ISO. Sure, it's grainy. It's got grain, but it's 100,000 ISO. It's unreal what you can see and what you can capture with this. I saw another comment. Can you push the exposure a bit? All right, so I'm gonna, just for you guys, I'm gonna push it a little bit. Now, of course, we're gonna see some more grain coming in, right? If you push it far, you gotta watch for banding. But here you see that's a one-stop push. To me, that still looks serviceable. I could probably push it a little further. Let's let auto do it, go crazy with it. No, too much. But you can see that you have a little bit of leeway still, but this is where we always say you want to make sure if you can, try and nail your exposure when you're at these extreme ISOs, because you don't have the latitude like you do with the Q2 Monochrome, M10 Monochrome over at the low ISOs. All right, a little further before we wrap up. Again, these are just some images that speak to black and white and the quality of these cameras as well. So this was long exposure on the M10 Monochrome. These are just my back porch steps. But there's a quality to capturing light like this in black and white that is special. It's, you know, it's part of why I think we're motivated and driven by black and white photography, whether it's analog or digital. And if we zoom in, right, it's sharpness for days.
It's crazy.
And this also, yeah, and this also is, nothing has been done to this. You know, it's just as is, straight out of the camera. So it's really sharp. It looks great. It's, again, a long exposure where you might have to, you know, when you get to very long exposures, you might have to be careful of like hot pixels and things like that. Of course, 24 seconds is pretty modest, so it wasn't too bad. But love the tonality from the M10 Monochrome. And again, I'll jump back to, you see, I just imported it and that's it. There's nothing else done to it. If we go to one more, another long exposure, also speaks to the quality of black and white. There's mystery to it, right? Here, I believe there's about a 16-second exposure, and really interesting and really cool what you can do, the way the lines draw your eye to the light source. Yeah, it's just, it's part of what's fun about taking pictures in black and white. And then, of course, with the monochrome, the tonality that you get, the sharpness that you get is just pretty unreal. Here, this one is at f4, so stop down a little bit on a 35mm Summicron aspherical lens. But again, long exposure, base ISO of 160, 16 seconds. Yeah, really quite nice. And again, let's take a look at the develop module. This is straight out of camera. The M10 Monochrome really often gets me, I think, 90 to 95% of the way there for me in most shots and most lighting. I don't find I need to do much with them at all. All right, couple more and then we're gonna have to wrap it up. So if you have any last minute questions, get them in, we'll try to answer them as we're going through this. This one I like to show because this image is completely out of focus. John, as you said, you took an image that you kind of purposefully threw out of focus because there's some kind of quality to that. And here, I was shooting with, you can see from our last episode, the Noctilux reissue, the one that just came out, the 50 f1.2. Really cool, and you could see with that classic rendering, it's got a bit of that swirly bokeh just ever so slightly. If I zoom in, actually, you can see there actually is a little bit in focus, and it's snow flurries that were just starting to come down. Really crazy to see that that's ever so slightly in focus. It kind of was what I was targeting.
Talented,
but
Antonio.
thank you, John.
To get that in focus.
And that's at 200%. Here's 100%. Yeah. So it's pretty awesome to see that kind of razor thin depth of field and that tonality and quality to this image, which is mostly out of focus, but that's okay. That's part of the charm of this is, you know, that ethereal look to black and white, especially with a classic lens. All right, and then I promise this is the last one. One more because I love it so much. The Noctilux reissue. Yeah, f1.2. I'm a sucker for this lens, and I was so sad to have to turn it over and give it back. So here's another M10 monochrome shot with the Noctilux 1.2, wide open. Really has that, as we say, emotional rendering, and it just lends itself to black and white so much. It's not the sharpest thing in the world, no. But, you know, again, that's what a classic lens gets you. It's all about the look. And when you bring it up to this tree, you know, in the way that separation, that fall off stands out, it's pretty fun, pretty unique, and to me, it's quite special. Let's see. All right, I see a quick question. Can Q2 Monochrome support long exposure? It doesn't have the long exposure chops that the M10 Monochrome does, but I believe the Q2 Monochrome can do a 60-second exposure. So you have some versatility there for sure. Any other further questions before we wrap this up? I think we've showed you a good amount of little Lightroom examples. I hope that's helpful. And yeah, would hope, feel free, of course, to reach out if you've got some further questions. Let's see, real quick. Do you both typically John, and feel free to chime in. Do you typically shoot a stop down or adjust at all with the M10 Monochrome? What's your rhyme or reason, John? Do you try to nail exposure on any ISO, or do you go more under and push in post? How do you like to do it with the M10 Monochrome?
Well, to be honest, I tend to be maybe a half stop under. A lot of times, I mean, it does depend on, the subject matter. With snow, which is apparently all I've been photographing for the last several weeks, looking at my Lightroom images. Normally I would be +2, but with M10 Monochrome, I'm usually like +1.5, and I find it gets me pretty much right where I want to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. I find that we're in the winter doldrum months, right? It can be tough to keep your motivation, and I find actually black and white photography helps motivate me when the weather is so dreary, because I love the way that you render in black and white with those overcast, snowy days, or the snow itself. There's a really nice quality to it. It helps kind of motivate me to take more pictures. And so I find that this is the time for monochrome. I joke that, hey, let's take those black and white images. It's tough to not be depressed a little bit these days, but let's get some black and white. Let's write some bad poetry, whatever it takes, to keep yourself motivated and keep the creative juices flowing. That also can sometimes cheer me up too. All right, so the final questions. Someone did ask that, will they be able to watch this later? Yes, you will be able to watch this in its entirety on our YouTube channel. And yeah, we definitely want you to share it with friends. Let's see, we had another question that I really liked. Center metering, spot metering, or full evaluative metering on the M10 Monochrome. So on the M10 cameras, when you're using the rangefinder, it's just spot metering. When using live view, that's when you have those options for the 3 different metering modes. So when I'm on live view, I'll keep it on multi-point evaluative metering and take the benefit of that. Otherwise, of course, it's just spot metering through the rangefinder. And yes, more comments. Again, John, I'm going to support what you're saying. We're usually with the M10 Monochrome and Q2 Monochrome, I typically will shoot a little bit underexposed. I see more people asking questions about that. So that's pretty cool. All right. This is a lot of information. I know we've gotten a little long, so we really appreciate everyone sticking with us. We just had so much that we wanted to show you and so much to share. I think, John, we just love the monochrome, right? That's what it comes down to. We really love these cameras, and we're motivated by them.
Yeah, it's definitely, and it's part of it is that creative tool that can break the doldrums, right? They can get you to think in a different way. And, for some people, it may be shooting with a rangefinder or shooting with any, Q2 monochrome or an M10 monochrome. It's just that change of pace that allows you another paintbrush to create some great images and create your own narrative. So I really, and I know you do as well, I really enjoy shooting the monochrome. Particularly for myself, it's images that, to me, I feel are timeless and allow me to tap more into an emotional value of those images that get me to think beyond simple color.
For sure, and John, I don't think I could have said it much better myself. There's something to these cameras. I think we've gone a lot over what's so special about them, the technical qualities, the intangibles, the emotional qualities. There's a lot to love if you love black and white. And before we wrap, folks, I want to remind you, yes, we will post this on the Leica Camera USA YouTube page. Be sure to like and subscribe when you see it posted. And if you subscribe to Leica Camera USA on YouTube and hit the bell, you'll, of course, be notified whenever we're uploading our videos, including these full replay videos of this content. And maybe, on the replay, John, maybe for this one, maybe a drinking game. No, we won't encourage that, really. Every time we say monochrome, I think Don't do that, folks. That would be a recipe for disaster. But again, this has been fun. Thank you, everyone in the chat, for all this great feedback, great questions. There's something to black and white, right, folks? In the age of smartphones and pictures, the second there's millions or billions of photos being taken, but there's something to slowing down and seeing the world in black and white. It's an excellent quality and an excellent skill to have and an excellent thing to admire. So without further ado, John, thank you so much for joining me on this black and white journey.
My pleasure, Antonio, anytime. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in and sticking with us, and great comments in the chat. I really appreciate your participation. And for me, that's what makes these programs great, is that interaction. So keep those questions coming.
For sure. Thanks again, everyone. And until next time, see you again on Leica Tech Talk. Take care, everyone.
Take care, everybody.